Our maneuvers. I'm sure you all have read about it in the local paper, and I'm standing over here at the USO, which, was at the shoe factory, but that seems to be missing all of a sudden. I just walked past the depot to ask this fella a question. Thank you. Sir, could you tell these fine folks and myself kind of what's going on?
Well,
what we do?
In 1941, shortly before the United States declared war, General George S. Patton, he wasn't a general yet, led the 1st Tennessee maneuver from the National Guard Armory. And he said, to the folks of the 30th Division who were stationed in Nashville, he said he could leave here from Cookeville and get to Centerville in Hickman County before they could leaving Nashville. And so he told all of his soldiers, because he wanted to prove how important armored was, said stay off the roads, because he knew that 70 would be a roadblock. And so you had tanks and half tracks and jeeps going all through this area, and you had people behind writing checks to pay for the damage. And they did get to Centerville before the 30th Division did. Then in 1942, after we declared war, we decided we needed to have a maneuver area that was similar to what Germany and France looked like. And Patton, his grandmother lived in Lebanon. He'd been here many times. He knows that this terrain looks very much like the terrain in France and Germany. And so they staged things along the Cumberland River because that's roughly the same size as the Rhine. And Cookeville was the R&R facility. Over 1 million soldiers came to Cookeville between 1942 and 1944. And this is where they came to have fun. In order to do that, let me add one more thing.
Yeah, please do. He's right.
Cookeville, the state of Tennessee went dry in 1909, and then when Prohibition ended in 1933, Cookeville was still dry, but it was wet for the maneuvers. That's why if you go down here and see the sign that says Fox Cafe, beer 5 cents, that's during the war.
Now you fine folks, you guys know what wet and dry means? What does wet mean? Anyone know?
Alcohol.
Alcohol, that's correct. We were actually, so it was basically a Monday through Friday job. We had a regular training schedule. And every Friday night and Saturday night and Sunday night, us troops that were stationed at the USO would come here to the west side of Cookeville, and we were able to imbibe alcohol, specifically beer, which, trust me, the last thing that young soldiers needed in training was more beer, but we were granted that permission. And as this gentleman mentioned, we went to places like Fox's Cafe, which is also just down there, or at least it was. And across the street there was Poppy's Billiards. It was one of the few places you could get beer in town. There was another place also that had beer. Is that correct?
That's where Whitburn Huddleston Funeral Home is now. That was a beer garden.
Oh.
And so they also had several. And at the USO there, that's where soldiers could come and they could make phone calls. They could meet people, could dance. But City Council in Cookeville was worried about all these soldiers coming into Cookeville. They were afraid for their daughters that they might go tacky wacky.
And being a signal officer, I just got a communique across my desk that I thought was interesting. It said that there's a battalion of Rangers learning how to free climb at a place called Burgess Falls. Now, why on earth do they need to climb up? What are they training for at a falls?
They're training for the D-Day invasion. And so when the Rangers took Pont-de-Hoc on D-Day, they learned to climb at Burgess Falls. That's where the major Ranger training for World War II was, right here. There's so many things were done in this area. Mount Juliet was the western terminus, Cookeville's the eastern terminus, and then everywhere in between was part of these maneuver tactics, where people were learning, they're using live fire, things like that, so these guys would know what combat conditions were really like.
Well, it's quite a nice little town. A few of us officers were talking just the other day of whenever the festivities end in Europe, maybe this might be a nice place. It's a little loud this time of night for a small town, but it's great. Thank you guys for coming tonight. Appreciate it. Head down the street there, and we'll see you.